This hurricane season, short summary, is going to be looking at the 1932 hurricane season. I managed to actually skip one in my list. I was actually realized I was supposed to do 1886 before this one, but I've already made this, so here we go. This season, as you can tell from the tracks seen here and the listing chronologically from May to November. Yes, we had a preseason storm here and then didn't have one until August, is a relatively above average season. We had 6 hurricanes from this season, 4 of them being major, a major hurricane being classified as category 3 and above. Those same major hurricanes are actually going to be the notables of this video. This season also had an ACE, accumulated cyclone energy of 171. ACE the is a number for the amount of energy used by a hurricane or just tropical system from when it becomes a tropical storm to when it degrades back into a tropical storm, into a depression, or uh, before it is classified as an extratropical cyclone or what have you. In total, the deaths from the season would be equal to or more than 3,500 people and at least $87 million in damage. Please note that 87 million is in 1932 US dollars. This is not accounted for 90-year-old inflation. Those notables that I mentioned earlier, again, the 4 major hurricanes are number 2, 4, 9, and 14. Chronologically, we start with Hurricane 2. Obviously, not the first storm in the season. It's actually the second, believe it or not. This is also called the Freeport Hurricane of 1932. What would become Hurricane 2 was first noted by ships as a possible disturbance in the south central Gulf of Mexico, and it would become hurricane strength on August 13th. It would then have some pretty rapid intensification and reached its peak on August 14th. That peak being winds of very high end Category 4 strength, 150 miles per hour, and a recorded minimum pressure of 942 with an estimated minimum of 937. Hurricane 2 would landfall on the same day as it reached its peak, August 14th, although not at its peak, thankfully. Landfall east of Freeport, Texas. Angleton, Texas's water pump station was destroyed by this hurricane, and this left Angleton, Texas without water for some time. Oklahoma would receive plenty of water, on the other hand, 12 whole inches, I'm assuming in the southern parts of Oklahoma, from the remnants of Hurricane 2. And I personally think that Hurricane 2 did Texas a favor by flooding the Galveston Causeway. I mean, who wants to be in Galveston? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Galveston is great. Even though I've never been there, Galveston's cool. You're cool. It's a joke. I'm sorry. Hurricane 2 in total would cause $7.5 million in damage and tragically kill 40 people. Hurricane 4 is also known as the 1932 Bahamas hurricane. With a very long track here, you can see that it decided to not um, fully degrade itself until it reached a gulf in Russia, believe it or not, tracking across Iceland, actually. But that's not the part of the track we're talking about. Hurricane 4 is actually the first and one of 4 hurricanes to strike the Bahamas at Category 5 intensity. What would become Hurricane 4 was first detected north of the Virgin Islands, now not Dutch anymore, on August 30th. It would then have some pretty rapid intensification after becoming a hurricane. It would landfall on the island of Great Abaco at its peak on September 5th, that peak being winds of 160 miles per hour and a minimum pressure of 921 millibars. In the town of Cooperstown and the island of Great Iguana Cay, there was only 6 homes and 4 homes respectively remaining after this storm went through. Granted, this is 1930s home building against a Category 5, which easily destroys modern homes still, but the point still stands that this was an extremely powerful storm. In the on the island, I should say, of Green Turtle Cay, 3-foot thick stone walls were destroyed. Reportedly, according to eyewitnesses, winds had to have been at or above 200 miles per hour to do this. However, take that with a grain of salt. There's no records of this thing having 200 mile per hour winds. Gusts could possibly reach there, but that would be a more than 40 plus mile per hour gust on top of the 160. Some church stone blocks, which actually had these stone walls, were reportedly carried up to half a mile. All again, also according to the same eyewitnesses, along with the stone walls, winds needed to be above 200 miles per hour to do this. Um, Again, personally, I don't believe this, so take the eyewitness reports as you will. In total, the Hurricane 4 would cause 16 reported deaths and 300 injuries. I think this definitely proves to show that even 90 years ago, when watches and warnings are heeded, they save lives. A mysterious one, Hurricane 9, is also known as the 1932 San Ciprian hurricane. If I am pronouncing San Ciprian, I apologize. Phonetics is not my strong suit. I may speak English, but I do not major in it. Hurricane 9 is also one of the strongest storms to ever affect Puerto Rico in its history. I call this hurricane mysterious because it has an unclear history, even though its path is pretty well laid out, as you can see in the top right. The dates are unknown for the most part, and I couldn't find much information on this even when I was trying to research this off stream. I was having a difficult time finding information. What we at least do know is that it reportedly peaked at Category 4 with winds of 145 miles per hour and a possible pressure of 943 millibars. Also, a little unusual is the quite atypical southward track this storm took, remaining overall relatively flat, but still a little southward. This was due to an insanely strong and also very, very large high pressure to its north. High pressures absolutely steer hurricanes. That's why when there is when hurricane season is around in the Atlantic in the U.S., you commonly hear the Bermuda High, which is just a high that sits off close to the island of Bermuda, and that's that's where it gets its name. Besides this, Hurricane 9 would affect 49 municipalities of Puerto Rico, mainly affecting the northern municipalities the heaviest. Damage was described by a eyewitness reporter as worse than a 1928 hurricane that also hit Puerto Rico very, very hard. Hurricane 9 dumped 16 whole inches of rain on Puerto Rico and damaged or destroyed upwards of 90,000 homes. This is relatively evenly split between the amount of damaged homes and the amount of destroyed homes. While warnings were definitely heeded um, due to Hurricane 9, what happened to cause 272 deaths and 4,800 injuries were that buildings that were advised to go into because they were strong turned out to not be strong enough to weather this storm, and many collapsed, which tragically killed the people inside. Because also of these collapsed buildings, there'd be $36 million in damage. Our last notable is Hurricane 14, also known as also known as the 1932 Cuba hurricane. This hurricane was first identified on October 30th, 320 kilometers east of Guadalupe. It reached Category 2 status on November 3rd, pretty damn close to South Africa. And this is a little weird because of how it's worded and how it's reported as, but it's officially a Category 5, although for some reason, many sources or a few just have conflicting reports on the peak category and then the wind speeds because they say that it peaked at Category 4, but then have Category 5 winds. So I'm gonna go with it was a Category 5 because that's also what is listed here on its path. That is the red right here, and also holds a very special Category 5 record. These winds were around 165 miles per hour, and I do indeed completely forget its minimum pressure. Hurricane 14 maintained its Category 5 status for 78 consecutive hours. This makes number 14 the longest lasting Atlantic Category 5 still to this day. The damage is next here. The towns near Barranquilla is a town in South America, reported heavy damage. The true, any specifics on damage at that is unknown. There would be an insanely high 33-foot storm surge on the Cayman Islands, and Santa Cruz del Sur was destroyed by a 21 and a third foot storm surge. Th- th- that is just insane. That is as tall and taller than my house. That's very scary. This storm, because of these storm surges, caused over 3,000 deaths, around 3,010 of which coming from Cuba alone, and it caused at least $30 million in damage. Reports go as high as nearly 50 million. This season is the first ever on record to have more than one Category 5 storm, believe it or not. There have only been around six others that have done this. One of them, obviously, being 2005, and I believe also 2020 and 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Like I mentioned with number 4, it is the first recorded Category 5 landfall on the Bahamas. Number 9, like I mentioned with that one, is also, again, one of the worst storms that has ever hit Puerto Rico. Again, like I said with number 14, it is so far the longest lived Atlantic Category 5 storm on record. It is also the deadliest in Cuban history and the strongest November hurricane as well to this day. And that, good folks, is all that I have for the 1932 hurricane season. I hope you all learned something from this. That's, of course, the point of these. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.